So what if I told you that hitting the snooze button this morning wasn't just a sign you were tired, but an actual microdose of poison?
Oh man, that is a heavy way to start the day.
I know, I know. It sounds incredibly dramatic, but we tend to view our early morning routines like scrolling past a few headlines, ignoring an email, lingering in bed as completely neutral events.
Right. Just normal stuff.
Yeah, just the harmless background noise of getting the day started. Today, however, we are looking at a framework that shatters that illusion entirely.
It really does.
It treats our most mundane daily habits not as background noise, but as a high stakes negotiation with our own future. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
If you're listening to this, you're probably someone who loves to learn, someone constantly trying to cut through the absolute avalanche of daily information, to find the frameworks that actually change how you operate.
You want the real signal and noise.
Exactly. You want a shortcut to being well informed. And today we have a really profound one for you. We're unpacking a fascinating synthesized document we received. It's titled simply Day 103 Essay.docsex.
Such an unassuming title for what it is.
Totally. It's an incredible thematic map that manages to seamlessly weave together ancient Stoic philosophy, modern sports history, Buddhist thought, and the American civil rights movement.
Quite the lineup.
It is. And the entire mission of our deep dive today is to explore one fundamental, inescapable concept, which is what you feed yourself.
And we really have to expand our definition of feeding here. Like, we aren't just talking about what lands on your breakfast plate.
Right, not just, eggs and toast.
Yeah, the core tension we are exploring is the reality that every single day, the unexamined choices we make regarding our habits, our attention, and our passing thoughts are doing one of two things.
Okay.
They're either quietly building us up or they're quietly taking us down.
Wow.
The uncomfortable truth is that there is no middle ground here. There's no holding pattern.
Exactly. So let's start right at the foundation of this idea because it really establishes the lens for everything else we're going to talk about today. There is a quote early on from Anne Wigmore.
The holistic health advocate.
Yes, exactly. And she said, "The food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison."
It's a striking way to phrase it. And what is so critical here is how we can elevate this from, basic dietary advice into a comprehensive life philosophy.
Yeah.
The entire weight of that quote rests on one specific word, which is slowest.
Slowest.
Right. Poison, when we were talking about poor daily choices, doesn't look like a Hollywood movie. It doesn't drop you on the
Yeah,
spot.
just foam at the mouth and fall over.
Exactly. It accumulates. It compounds. It is the seemingly harmless daily habit, repeated without any conscious examination,
Yeah.
that eventually degrades your foundation. And this applies directly to your mind, your soul, and your character. Choosing the warmth of the covers over the call of the day, indulging in petty gossip, staring at a screen for 3 hours, those are active choices of what to feed your attention.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that word compounds really strikes a chord for me. It's exactly like compound interest in finance, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like in investing, if you make small, consistent deposits over decades, that money grows exponentially into a massive fortune.
Yeah.
But if you're taking out high interest debt, even in tiny amounts, like putting a daily coffee on a credit card you can't pay off, the math eventually crushes you.
It always does.
There is no neutral state in compound interest. Your net worth is either growing or shrinking. And what Wigmore's quote is arguing, applied to our lives, is that the daily deposits of our thoughts and habits are compounding into either lifelong medicine or lifelong poison.
Right. And the scary thing about compound interest, whether it's money or your habits, is that in the early years, the growth is completely invisible.
You don't even notice it.
Yeah. No, you don't see the poison destroying your character on day 4, just like you don't see the medicine healing you on day 10. You just have to trust the mechanism.
Wow.
Every idea you let in, every resentment you hold on to, every rigorous task you avoid, it is all an investment in one direction or the other.
That is heavy.
So if we accept that every input matters and it inevitably compounds, the logical first step to stop poisoning ourselves isn't necessarily to search for better inputs right away.
Wait, really? What is it then?
It is to radically reduce the sheer volume of our transactions.
Mm-hmm.
If you are consuming too much or trying to perform too much, you are exponentially increasing your exposure to that slow poison.
Which brings us to the concept of restraint, or this really beautiful idea of the economy of self.
Yes.
Because if we want to reduce our inputs, we have to look at the people who mastered brevity. You see this perfectly embodied by Marcus Aurelius.
Sure.
Writing in his private journal, which we now call Meditations, he explicitly tells himself not to act grudgingly, selfishly, or to be a contrarian. And then he leaves himself this instruction. He says, don't be a person of too many words and too many deeds.
The irony of that specific instruction is just profound when you consider his reality.
Yeah. So,
Well, for most of his adult life, Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. He commanded armies, governed a massive empire, and held absolute authority.
right.
He could literally say or do anything to anyone without a single repercussion. Absolute power usually breeds absolute excess.
Yeah, usually.
Yet the hardest instruction he gives himself, in the total privacy of his own journal, is to use fewer words, to do fewer things, to actively choose to be less visible.
It's incredible restraint. And you see modern thinkers like Ryan Holiday observe that the masters of economy and brevity are the ones we admire most historically, because what they deliberately leave out is often far more important than what they leave in.
That's a great point.
There are some great literary parallels to this in the document, too. Think of Philip Levine's poem titled, He Would Never Use One Word Where None Would Do.
A brilliantly self-proving title, honestly.
Right, or even Shakespeare. In Hamlet, Queen Gertrude gets so fed up with the long-winded, overly intellectual, self-congratulatory speeches of Polonius that she just interrupts him and says, more matter with less art.
Just get to the point.
Basically, yeah, stop dressing it up.
And this philosophy of economy shows up in the psychology of characters you might not immediately associate with Stoicism.
Like who?
Take C.S. Lewis's The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, specifically the character of Reepicheep the Mouse.
Oh, I love Reepicheep.
Right. He is physically the smallest fighter in Narnia,
Right.
but he is undeniably the most valiant.
Hmm.
And the psychological mechanism at play with Reepicheep is that his bravery is entirely unperformed.
Unperformed. Interesting.
It doesn't require lengthy declarations, PR campaigns, or grand speeches to validate it. When he is called to sail over the edge of the world, he simply says his goodbyes and steps forward. He does what is asked, he does it well, and he does it without excess.
I love that.
And Tony Dungy reflects on this kind of mindset, pointing out that the faithful good life is almost never about grand, dramatic, cinematic gestures. It is built on small, quiet, daily steps.
It compounding again.
Exactly. It's the unglamorous consistency of how we treat our families, our coworkers, and the people who can do absolutely nothing for us.
I have to push back a little on this, though, or at least frame it against the reality of the world you and I actually live in.
Sure, go for it.
We live in an attention economy that actively glorifies the hustle. We are told constantly to maximize our output, to produce more content, to build a personal brand, to make sure everyone knows exactly what we are achieving at all times.
Definitely.
So is the poison we were talking about earlier actually this modern obsession with overproduction? Like, are we overdressing our lives to the point of exhaustion?
I think so, yeah.
Because it seems to me that restraint, in today's context, isn't just an aesthetic choice to look cool and minimalist. It has to be an intentional, almost militant spiritual discipline.
Yes, and to build on that, the friction of applying Marcus Aurelius's advice today is exponentially harder than it was in Rome.
Why?
Because Rome didn't have algorithms designed to reward too many words.
Oh, true. That's so true.
The overproduction, the constant broadcasting of our lives, that is the poison masquerading as productivity.
Mm.
The medicine is economy. It is showing up quietly and doing the work without needing an audience to validate your existence.
Right.
But here is the psychological trap. Stripping away that excess naturally leaves us facing our own vulnerabilities. When you take away the performance, the busy work, and the constant noise, you are left alone with yourself.
Yeah, just you.
And because you are human, you are inevitably going to stumble.
Exactly. Less is more, but less also means you have absolutely nowhere to hide. So when all that excess is gone and we inevitably fail, how are we supposed to handle it?
That's the question.
Which introduces this really fascinating tension between self-reliance and the necessity of asking for help. And if we look back at Marcus Aurelius, there's an apparent contradiction in how he handles failure.
Yeah, I noticed that.
In one breath, he demands that we get active in your own rescue. But in the next, he writes, don't be ashamed to need help. Comparing the human experience to a wounded soldier storming a wall who physically needs a comrade to reach down and pull him up.
It looks like a contradiction, but these are actually sequential steps.
Okay, explain that.
It's a mechanism we can call earned interdependence. The Stoic ideal isn't to be an isolated, emotionally repressed island of rooked self-sufficiency.
Thank goodness.
Right. The goal is to put in the grueling work to develop your own resilience first. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus was famously blunt about this. His advice was simply, blow your own nose.
Wow. Very direct.
Very. You take care of your own basic emotional and mental hygiene so that when you do hit a wall and ask for help, it is strategic. It's mission-driven. You are a soldier mid-charge, asking another committed soldier for a tactical hand-up. You aren't just sitting helplessly on the ground, waiting for the universe to notice you and carry you to the finish line.
You have to actually be moving. Which reminds me of Musonius Rufus, who argued that clear reason, not waiting around for the gods to descend from the sky and magically fix your life, is the actual medicine to cure being violently bashed around by your own emotions.
Absolutely.
And there's a really compelling Buddhist perspective on this from Robert Wright. He points out that happiness ultimately comes down to a choice between two very distinct types of pain.
I'll love this part.
Right. You either choose the severe discomfort of becoming intimately aware of your own mental afflictions, or you suffer the agonizing discomfort of being blindly ruled by them. They both hurt, but only one of them is medicine.
Exactly.
Wait, hold on. I need to stop you there because there's a glaring contradiction here that we have to resolve.
What's that?
We just established through Epictetus and the Buddhists that the work is inward. You have to blow your own nose, sit with your discomfort, and examine your own mind.
Right.
But there's a contemporary piece of advice in our sources from entrepreneur Sam Parr, and his cure for feeling lost is the exact opposite.
Oh, I see where you're going.
He says to stop looking inward entirely. Go outward, have a kid, get a dog, take on a massive responsibility where someone else is relying on you. Aren't those two approaches, staring at your own mind versus staring at a dog you have to feed at war with each other?
It absolutely seems like it on the surface. One is pure introspection, the other is total externalization.
Right.
But if we dig into the underlying psychological mechanism, they are operating on the exact same engine. What do both of those approaches demand from you?
Action.
Proactive effort, yes.
Yeah.
They both force a shift from passive suffering to active responsibility.
Right.
When you are lost in an anxiety loop, you are essentially trapped in a state of passive victimhood.
Oh, that makes sense.
Whether you break that loop by actively clinically dissecting your own mental afflictions in meditation, or by actively getting up to feed a dependent animal, you are taking ownership of the present moment.
You're doing something.
Right. You have stopped waiting to be rescued. The internal question shifts from, why am I so lost? To, what does this immediate situation require of me? That shift in focus, from passive to active, is the rescue itself.
The action itself is the forward motion. Okay, that clears it up completely, but let's be honest, doing that once is relatively easy. Anybody can get motivated for one afternoon.
Sure.
Sustaining that active responsibility every single day for years, that is where most people break down. Which brings us to the stamina required for greatness, or what we can call the edge.
The edge.
There's a historical parallel here from 1960 that illustrates this perfectly. A journalist named Richard Whalen was trying to land an interview with Diane Nash and the other student organizers of the civil rights sit-ins.
And we have to pause and respect the context of what these students were doing. They were challenging a deeply entrenched, violent, and systemic power structure.
Yeah, it wasn't just a protest, it was life or death.
The local police, the legal system, the majority of public opinion, it was all weaponized against them. They had virtually no institutional power and were facing severe personal and physical risks every time they walked out the door.
Exactly. So Whalen, who is representing Time magazine, which was an absolute juggernaut of media power at the time, assumes they will drop everything to speak with him.
Naturally.
Instead, he finds out they're simply too busy grinding out the actual work. The only time they can possibly squeeze him in is at 6 a.m., right before their daily morning strategy session.
Incredible.
And Whalen's reaction is just perfect. He realizes they are already up, already strategizing before the sun rises, and he mutters to himself, they're going to win, aren't they?
He recognized the mechanism of the edge. He saw a level of unglamorous, dark hour commitment that went so far beyond mere talent or situational enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And you see this same psychological profile in sports. George Raveling tells a story about a young Kevin Johnson arriving at the Boston Garden hours early for a 7 p.m. basketball game.
Just way ahead of time.
Right. The arena's basically empty. The lights aren't even fully up. He hears a ball bouncing, peeks out onto the court, and sees Larry Bird.
Oh, man.
And keep in mind, Bird isn't a rookie trying to prove himself. He is the reigning 3-time MVP as a league at this point.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Larry Bird is already at the absolute mountaintop. Human psychology normally dictates that once you achieve ultimate success, you relax. You've earned the right to coast.
Precisely. The gravitational pull of success is complacency. But Bird is out there in his uniform shooting corner threes in an empty gym.
Crazy.
Johnson sits and watches him make 35 three-pointers in a row before he finally gives up, waiting for Bird to miss and goes back to the locker room.
He just gave up.
Yeah, Bird wasn't going to let his edge dull just because he had a trophy. The edge is defined by what you are willing to do when absolutely no one is watching, when there is no external reward on the line.
It's internal.
Greatness is not some mystical, innate gift. It is a learned skill and a daily chosen identity.
I love looking at it that way. Talent is really just the entry ticket to the arena, and it gets you in the building.
Yeah.
But the edge is the daily medicine you swallow to ensure you stay on the court. It's the choice you make when nobody is clapping.
Perfectly said.
Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, argued that true well-being is realized by small, almost imperceptible steps. And there's that famous line from 2 Timothy 4.7 in the Bible about fighting the good fight and finishing the race.
Right.
The vital realization is that the race isn't a magnificent, heroic sprint. It's a marathon run across 10,000 profoundly ordinary days.
That's the hard part.
It is. If you're listening right now on your commute or at the gym or sitting at your desk, you might not be an MVP basketball player or a civil rights icon. But the edge is what happens when your boss leaves the office at 4 p.m. on a Friday.
Yep.
Do you instantly coast, or do you keep shooting your metaphorical corner threes?
That is the perfect modern application. But we have to address the final and perhaps most difficult layer of this.
Okay, what's that?
Sustaining that edge in the dark, in an empty arena at 3 p.m. or a quiet office at 4 p.m. requires immense discipline. But sustaining it when the crowd arrives, when public opinion shifts, and when the world actively pushes against you.
That's different.
Very. That requires something far deeper than discipline. That requires uncompromising character and integrity.
Which introduces a completely different dynamic into our conversation. Up
Yeah.
until now, we've talked about quiet restraint. But Robert Greene, in his book, The 48 Laws of Power, introduces a rule that feels incredibly loud.
Yeah, it really does.
He argues that it is better to be attacked than ignored. He says you have to actively court controversy and force yourself to stand out.
It does feel abrasive, especially compared to Marcus Aurelius telling himself to use fewer words.
Definitely.
But if we look at the mechanics of what Greene is really saying, he isn't advocating for being a troll or generating cheap controversy just to game an algorithm.
Right, not just being annoying for the sake of it.
He is warning against the slow poison of the invisible life, the playing it safe, blending in, perpetually agreeable existence.
Ah.
Marcus Aurelius despised self-indulgence dressed up as philosophical depth, but Greene despises mediocrity disguised as polite conformity. What they actually agree on is that you cannot allow the consensus of the crowd to dictate your internal compass.
Booker T. Washington captured that exact sentiment beautifully. He said, "A lie doesn't become truth, wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it is accepted by a majority."
A powerful quote.
You have to be willing to stand for something structurally sound, even if you are standing completely alone. John Wooden echoed this as well, noting that ability might get you to the top of the mountain, but it is exclusively character that keeps you there.
Character is the structural integrity that remains when the performance stops, when the cameras pack up, and the arena finally empties.
Yeah.
But there is a crucial counterweight to this required to keep it healthy. The actor Alan Alda has this brilliant instruction about how to handle your own worldview.
I really like this part.
He says you have to constantly scrub your assumptions clean the exact same way you would scrub a window, otherwise the light simply won't come in.
So what does this all mean for us practically? Because I see a very real psychological tension here.
How do you mean?
Well, on one side, Robert Greene and Booker T. Washington are telling you to plant your flag, stand out, and take the attacks. Be resolute. On the other side, Alan Alda is telling you to constantly question and scrub your own assumptions. I think the synthesis here is that true character isn't just loudly planting a flag and aggressively refusing to budge no matter what new evidence appears.
No, definitely not.
That's not character, that's just fragile ego. True character is having the courage to plant your flag in the storm, but possessing the deep humility to keep actively cleaning your own lens so you aren't blinded by your own stubbornness.
Exactly. Because if you don't continually scrub the glass,
Mm.
that conviction ferments into rigid dogma.
Right.
The person of genuine character views their integrity as a daily, active practice, not a static, defensive posture, which brings all these disparate threads beautifully together. We've mapped out the economy of self, earned independence, the daily edge, and the humility of character.
We really have covered a lot.
The ultimate question is, how do we actually ingest this as daily medicine?
We can look to Ryan Holiday's interpretation of Marcus Aurelius for the practical application. Holiday points out that we shouldn't treat philosophy like a harsh taskmaster constantly whipping us into shape and making us feel inadequate.
That's a huge relief.
Right. Instead, we should approach it the way a patient seeks a soothing ointment for a severe burn. It is meant to be a highly practical, comforting treatment for the heaviest moments in human life.
Yes.
When you inevitably lose a job or a long-term relationship dissolves, or you are sitting in a sterile room getting a difficult medical diagnosis, that is the exact moment these ideas act as medicine.
It's not an academic exercise. It is vital emergency care. But to effectively administer that care to ourselves, we have to pull our minds into the present. Jim Kwik summarizes this elegantly. He says, to have a powerful presence, be powerfully present.
Be powerfully present.
You cannot heal if you are paralyzed by anxiety about the future or trapped ruminating on the failures of the past.
You have to be right here, operating in the current moment.
Precisely. And there is one final, incredibly poignant piece of our source material that perfectly encapsulates this daily renewal.
What's that?
The author of the essay notes an anonymous line scrawled at the very top of a journal. It says, breathing in today, breathing out yesterday.
Love that visual.
It is a physical reminder to let the past go. And that is paired with a quote from the pioneering physician William Osler, who stated simply, every day is a new life to a wise man.
Every day is a new life. I want you to really think about the mechanics of that. Tomorrow morning, when that alarm goes off again and you wake up to your brand new life, what are you going to actively choose to feed your mind?
That's the question.
In those quiet, unglamorous moments when absolutely nobody is watching before the sun has even come up, are you going to slip back into the slow, compounding poison of your unexamined habits? Or will you do the hard work of choosing the quiet, daily medicine of character? The compounding interest of your life starts right now, and the choice of what to deposit is entirely yours.